Welcome back to the next video of our interview series. So in the previous video, we have seen like what are the basic questions we have in Angular when you are facing an interview, and that video was mainly focused for the 0 to 2 year experience because it was covering only the basic topics and all the normal questions we have in all those topics. Okay, so this video I'm focusing on little bit on a higher side. Let's say if you have experience greater than 4 plus, so this is the right video for you. So we are not going to cover all the basic questions again. So we will just see all the advanced questions, just 20 to 25 questions are there that we will going to see. Okay, so first question is like, what are the loading strategies we have in Angular? So question is quite strange. Loading strategies in Angular. Those who have not heard this, yes, we have three loading strategies. First is the eager, lazy, you might have heard. Then preloading is also is there. So in eager, what the by default when we create the project, what is the by default? So eager is the by default loading strategy we have. Like all the components load at a one time. Okay. So you can see eager loading is the default loading strategy for all the components in Angular. It load all the component registered in app module for the first time only. Okay. So once all the components are loaded, then they will be rendered on the page. Okay. Again, there is advantages and disadvantages. We won't go into the deep because what is the lazy loading? We have that question. Okay. So second is the lazy loading. So if your components, let's say number of components are getting increased by the day by day. So when you deploy your Angular application, your main.js will be high. It will have the size of the main.js will be increasing. Okay, so it will take your Angular application to load on the browser because all your components, all your directive services, all the component code will be in a single JS. Okay, so to overcome that, we have the lazy loading. So in lazy loading, we distribute our components into various modules, right? Okay, so this is the second strategy, and third is the preloading. So preloading is like we can inform the Angular to load the first component only. Okay, so it will load only that first component. Once that first route is loaded completely, then it will load all other components. Okay, so that Angular doesn't have to wait for your for all the components to load. So as you can see, the preloading strategy loads the first route component to the render the page as quickly as possible. Let's say in our application we normally keep our login page by default, so it will just first load that login component first. Once that component loaded completely on the browser, then it will load the remaining. Okay, so that will increase your speed. So for this, you just have to add one strategy in the app module. So routing module for route, then preloading strategy, and we have to pass the preloaded modules. Okay, so this is the only configuration we have to do. Let's move on to next question. You might also face like various ways. Many of the guys will ask you like what are the various ways to secure the Angular application. So as in such, we don't have any specific answer to this, but we can comparatively say some of the listed down. Let's say prevent application from cross-site scripting. This is again not related to Angular, but to all the web application. Use guards when are required. This is related to Angular. We apply guards when we want to authenticate the user or authenticate the particular route. If user is not authenticated, we don't allow user to visit that route. Content security policies we can apply. So content security policies, again, it is a JavaScript or the normal HTML standards. It doesn't have to do anything with Angular. So while declaring it, we can provide it like script source is equal to self. So it doesn't execute any script which is outside of our domain. Okay, do not use DOM APIs directly. It's again like always, let's say you want to display HTML coming from the API and you want to display that directly into your component. Use sanitizer to what we can say sanitize that whatever the content you have, then bind it to your HTML. Okay, cross-site request forgery. This is again what we have normally with the web applications. So we can override the default value by using in HTTP module. So with HTTP client HTTP module with options, we can now what we can say, we can just change the default name to something else, like cookie name and header name we can change to something else. Okay, then prevent cross-site script inclusion, up-to-date Angular libraries, don't customize the Angular file, and we can have multiple outlet with input the name. So you might have heard like router outlet is there, which is responsible to load the activated route, but we can pass name also to the multiple outlet. Okay, so let's say we have two router outlet and we can have name is equal to 1, name is equal to 2, and at the time of loading we can decide which router outlet I have to use. So we have a configuration for that. So these are the all normal function methods by which we can secure the Angular application. Okay, again some of the mix are normal web applications, some are from the Angular. DSL. So DSL is just a short form for domain specific language. It is again not related to Angular, but many of the interviewer will ask like what is Angular DSL. So domain specific language mean we use star ng for, we use square bracket, we use round bracket. So these are not part of the HTML, right? But and it doesn't browser doesn't know like what is round bracket, what is square bracket, and what is star. But still Angular lets us to use that. So that is because of domain specific language. Okay, so Angular has its own domain specific language which allows us to write Angular specific HTML like syntax on the top of the normal HTML. Okay, so whatever we write using round bracket, square bracket, and star, that is nothing but domain specific language, because Angular has that language specifier which allows us to write HTML like syntax on the top of the normal HTML. Okay, next thing, change detection. Yeah, so change detection is what the Angular makes powerful. So change detection means updating the DOM wherever data is changed. Angular provides the two strategies for the change detection. In default, what we don't by default, it is a default strategy. When data is muted or changed, Angular will run the change detection and will update the DOM. Okay, but another way is on push strategy. That is the second strategy we have. Angular will not run the change detection when the new reference is passed to the input. Okay, now see the implementation. Let's say we have an app message component. Okay, and we have one input person. So now if we have changed the value, so you can see in other component I'm using this app message and passing the input to the person with data. If I have changed the data, it won't display the updated value on the app message component, because in the component I have specified like change detection strategy to on push, means it will not automatically detect the change. We have disabled that. So to detect the change, we have to use content detector ref. This is a service which we get from the Angular core. Okay, so then we have to, what we can say, we have to get the updated data from the input. So we can make the input as an observable, then we can subscribe to that observable. If that data person value get changed, we can subscribe to that. Then we can use our content detector ref service to mark for check. Now this line will automatically trigger the change detection. Okay, so whenever someone asks like how do we use on push strategy, so in component decorator first we have to specify the change detection strategy, like change detection strategy dot on push, so that component won't detect the change. Okay, so in that scenario we have to use change detection rep service and then mark for check. So this will actually manually trigger the change detection, then that change will be what I can say printed on the HTML. Okay, so this is about on push change detection strategy. Let's see the next, zone. So again, the related question to the change detection, zone is a way to persist the execution context across synchronous tasks. Okay, Angular uses zone to enable the automatic change detection in response to the changes made by the asynchronous task. So as I told you, like change detection, what is done when the value get changed or muted, the same get replicated on the HTML side also, right? So that all that is happening because of zone. Okay, so let's say we have a set timeout method. In set timeout we do some asynchronous code, right? We wait for some particular second okay, so since set timeout it waits for particular code to happen in particular second. After that again it start the execution. So that is possible because of zone. Okay, so one more way is like we can, let's say, what we can say, if we need some changes to occur but we don't want that to detect the changes. Okay, so we have this service ng zone. We can create the instance of the service, and if we want some code that you don't want to trigger the change detection, right, one way is like we can have the change detection strategy on push that won't detect the change. Another way is using zone also. So you can run all your code inside run out of outside the angular run outside angular. So all the code you run inside this, let's say num value is 1 by default, and inside this run outside function you are changing the num is equal to 2. So this won't get reflected because we have changed the value inside this function. Okay, so because that zone will persist a separate execution context that will stop change detection. Okay, so this is about zone. Dependency injection tokens, or someone called as DI tokens. Okay, so dependency injection systems in Angular uses tokens to uniquely identify the providers. Like up to Angular 6, we had to provide whatever the service we create, we used to provide that in the providers. But after Angular 6, it is not necessary to provide. By default, we create the service. It is available globally. Okay, so if you see the syntax over here, there are three types of tokens that you can create in Angular. Token types are token, then string token, and then injection token. Okay, so as you can see, way first. So this is nothing but normal service. In provide, we have provided provider service, product service, and use class as a product service. So this is our first way. Second is we can pass the string value like this. You can see the product service is enclosed in the string. So this is string token. Okay. Third is using injection. Let's say we are getting the service from any external URL. We don't have that service in my particular Angular project, but still I am going to use it. You understand in scenario? If I have a service in some another domain, if I hit that domain, I will get that service file. I'm going to use that service file in my Angular application. So it is possible using injection token. So first we have to import the injection token, then we have to provide the API URL, and in providers you can see provider, that API URL you have to pass, and on use value you have to pass the actual your endpoint of that URL from where you will get the service. Okay, and just to annote that inside this object, so first property, that is provide, holds the token or the dependency injection token. Okay, and the token can be either string or the three types what we have. Okay, and the next use class is the value. Okay, so this is about dependency injection or DI tokens. Another interesting question is various ways of bootstrapping the Angular application. So by default, we know like bootstrapping Angular application is like only bootstrap the app module, like whatever the first component we want to bootstrap, right? So there are two ways. First is the default, like what by default is like app module get bootstrap by default. Okay, so it's, as you can see, platform browser dynamic parts create the platform for our Angular module, and Angular platform is the entry point of our Angular app in a web page. Each page has exactly one platform and the services such as reflection, which are commonly known to the every Angular application running on the page bound to its scope. Means this app module, like whatever like external modules, everything modules like lazy loaded module, all the component direct, everything will be registered in the app module, right? So we are initializing that by passing it. So that was the default strategy. One more way is manual bootstrapping. Okay, so what is manual bootstrapping? Let's say this is my component. Okay, the selector is decom and I have some template over here. Now after this component, you can see in app module what I will do. In app module we won't have that bootstrap section. Okay, so we have to, in app module we have to install, we have to implement the method ng do bootstrap. Okay, so like, okay, so with in ng do bootstrap, this is a manual bootstrapping. So you can see we have to create the what I can say, in my index.html file we have one h1 where id is given, So that we are selecting using normal JavaScript. Then we are assigning that it's loaded. Then we are creating the component, dynamic component over here. Document.create element decomp. Okay. Then document.body append child component element. Okay. Then app, the parameter we get dot bootstrap, and then we create pass the component. Okay. So this is another way, the manual bootstrapping. I will cover in the code in when we will see the code for the Angular element. Okay. So just to know, we have two methods. One is the by default and second is the manual bootstrapping. Okay. Next thing is dynamic component. Again, this is quite interesting. Dynamic means the component location in the application is not defined at the runtime. Like we use the component selectors and render it on the browser. That is not fixed. Okay, so we won't use that selector in the HTML anywhere. Dynamic component doesn't mean like we will create the component at the runtime. No, component will be there, just initialization will be dynamic. Okay, so as you can see, in HTML we will create a template where we will provide the hash value, and that we will pass it over, and we will create a view child of that HTML reference. Either instead of template we can have a div or ng container also. Okay, this will be in our component HTML, then this will be in our .ts. We are just creating a view child. Okay, next thing, in constructor we have to create the component factory resolver service instance. Okay, then create component. I have function is there. So here what we can see, container is nothing but view child option. So first I'm clearing it, then this dot resolver dot resolve component factory. Okay, this dot resolver, that is component factory resolver dot resolve component factory, and we have to pass the component name, component class which we want to dynamically create. Okay, so now in factory what we have got, instance of that component. Now that we will pass to the this dot component ref. Again we have created the object of the data type component ref, and this dot container dot create component, and we have passing this dot container dot create component, and we have passed our component instance. This factory we have passed it over here. Okay, so this is the way we will load the dynamic component into this container ng template. Okay, so again, like if we have some output in my reusable component that I want to get the value, we can do like subscribe this dot component ref dot instance dot output dot subscribe, and in event we will get the value. What are the output it gets emit from that component, dynamic component, we can subscribe to that. Okay, suppose you want to pass some inputs, okay, that you can pass using resolve component, then whatever the component we have, then object, we have to first create the object of that, then dynamic component object, that instance, then what are the inputs we have, like where one might be the input, then can pass like this. Okay, one thing to remember, like we have to destroy this dynamic component as well, otherwise it will keep exhausting our memory. So in ng on destroy we can destroy that. So you can see this dot component ref dot destroy we have done. Okay, so this is the way how we create the dynamic component. So dynamic component is nothing but with component factory resolver we create the instance in .ts and load that component into any view child using view child into any HTML. Okay, so this is dynamic component. Angular element. So again, Angular element is like what we talk about reusable thing. So reusable is like we can create a code that we can let's say reusable table we are creating, and that reusable component we can use not only in Angular, we can use that in .NET application as well, React or Java application as well. So that is reusable. It doesn't have to depend on any particular technology. We should use it anywhere. Okay, so that is possible because of Angular elements. Okay, so Angular element is what we have been provided with by the Angular. So advantages are reusability to a new level. With Angular element we can make our component truly reusable, means we can use in any other frameworks. Okay, then we can publish some part of the Angular application. Okay, now the implementation, I will just try to explain in bit. So first we need to install one package, ng add angular element. We don't have it by default, we have to install it. Then let's say we create a my table component. Okay, in app module we have to add the component in the entry component. So in entry component we have to pass that component. Okay, and like in app module we have the bootstrap section, we have to remove this was again covered in the manual bootstrapping. Okay, so this angular element and the manual bootstrapping is kind of the same, so we have to remove this. Then in imports we have to create the dynamic component like this. Injector, we have to create the service of the injector, then create custom element. To create a custom element is again from the angular element, then we have to pass our component name and pass the service injector. Okay, then custom element, that is the constant what we have created, dot define, this is my selector for that, and we have to pass the our component name, sorry, element. Okay, so this is the code what we have to do. Then first we have to build the application. Okay, so once we got the build, once we do the build, we will get the dist folder. So as you know, like in dist folder we get main.js, client.js, and some a number of files are there, right? But if we have to use that particular component in another application, so we need a single script, right? So for that we need to install one package, that is, let me see the package, fs extra concat. Okay, this is a package which get us a single script from our dist folder. Okay, so then you need a small code like this, like we have runtime.js, polyfill.js, and main.js. These are the three files we get in the dist folder. Okay, then we are combining that in the elements. Okay, and then we will get it a single file like concatenate.js. Okay, first we have to create this concatenate.js in the root folder, keep this code as it is. So this tool, okay, so in scripts, in package.json we have to add one script, that is build element, and command will be like ng build prod output hashing and node and concatenate.js. This is the file name what we have created. Okay, so once you run this command you will get a single js file, and that js file you can use anywhere. Okay, so and you can use the table, you can use the normal like a html table. So this is my selector, I can use it in a single html file or .NET or java, anything. So my angular code I can use anywhere with just that single file. Okay, so let me show you that example. Okay, so this is my that angular element project. So let me show you, message is my component name, but the structure is for reusable table. So this is the reusable table logic I have. I have two inputs, grid data and column data. So you can see here two inputs I have. Then I will show you the app module. So in app module we have the declaration, imports, and the entry component. You can see bootstrap is missing over here. Okay, then in app module we have to use the injector service. We have created the instance of my component. Then in custom elements we have passed define our what is the selector name and pass the custom element. Okay, and ng do bootstrap, that what we have seen manual bootstrapping. Okay, after that concatenate.js I have created. So these are the three files which we get once we build the application that we are building and keeping it in a this is the file name, something else file name I have got. Then so once you can see in the dist file we got these three, main.js, polyfill.js, and runtime. We are binding these three files, and in elements you will see this is the only js what I will get. Okay, so if we are using some css, we can use this css as well. Okay, so this is the minified code of all the dist, means where is our dist folder. Yeah, so this is the minimized code of all these three files, main.js, polyfill.js, and runtime.js. so this now analytic.counter.js I have used in my simple html file. So this is a normal html file where I have used its selector. Now so for this component we have two inputs, so we cannot pass this like this. Okay, so we have to pass it as a attribute. So you can see I have created data array, then column data I have created, then I have first selected the app selector. So this is nothing but element, so I can select that element using query selector. Then how we used to pass the data to a particular element, like using property cmp.getData, cmp.column data. So if I show you here, you can see we have two columns present over here. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so this is the example of Angular element. So using this script, so analytic.counter.js I have used on the top of it, just like we use any jQuery or the bootstrap file. Yeah, like this we have to import and we can use it in normal HTML or maybe .NET or maybe Java project or even React also we can use it. Okay, so that was about Angular element. Again, next question, like since Angular 14 is there, so just to list down new features we have. So first feature is standalone components. So standalone component means when we create the component, we don't have to provide it in the declaration section of my app module. That will be the individual component. Everything what we need, it will be there in cell. Okay. Then strictly type form. This is about the reactive forms. Means in reactive you can directly access all the controls. Now we don't have to pass the square bracket and access that value. Okay. Streamline page title accessibility. This is about in the route itself you can create the title, like this is what title I can see, this is what title see. We can declare that on the route level only. Then optional injector also is there. Okay, so these are just four major advantages or new features we have in Angular 14. Okay, then creating dynamic form control. This I think I have already covered, but I will just revise it. So dynamic controls in the reactive. So let's say this is my normal form where three fields are constant: name, email, and constant. But in contact you can see I have a form array. So inside this form array again I have the new form, and this form having type and the contact. Okay, so one parent form is there, and inside that parent form in contact property again I have the array of forms. Okay, so again that you need two methods, first to add and second to remove. So in add contact you can see constant control, I have taken form array, then I have passed this dot user form dot control, and the contact is my form array name. Then control dot push, I can create the new form over here and push it to the control, so that new form will be added to my user form. Okay, suppose I want to remove the form or dynamic added elements, so I can do that using, first I have to get the control, same like above, form array this dot user form dot control, and pass the form array name, and controls dot remove at an index. By using index you can remove it. Okay, so this was about creating dynamic forms. Resolvers. So resolver is again a guard what we have. So we have to implement a service which will implement the resolve. Okay, so that we need to pass in route. So resolver is nothing but if you need some data should be ready before loading the component. Okay, so in that case you can use the resolver. So while defining route you have to pass the resolve and you have to pass the service which you want to call before loading the component, and you can access whatever the data you get from here in this dot route snapshot data and whatever the name you give over here. So this was about resolver. Then virtual DOM. So virtual DOM is again not related to the Angular, but still it's coming to the web development, so someone will ask. So virtual DOM is nothing but extra DOM which gets created. It's mostly used in the React. So as you can see, virtual DOM is strategically to update the DOM without rendering all the node. Let's say some part of, let's say only this ULLI is being updated. So I won't touch all the, I won't redraw all complete DOM. I will just redraw this part of the element. So that is nothing but virtual DOM. So it compares the virtual DOM with the original DOM and it will replace the changed nodes only. Okay, so that you can keep in mind. Angular Universal. So Angular Universal is a server-side rendering module for the Angular application. Okay, Angular Universal is like just creating a static pages for your components. so that when the Angular application load, it will first load that static page. Bindings will be there, bindings won't be there. Once that static page loaded, after some times bindings will be there, so that performance will get improved. So the at least user will see some HTML. Okay, otherwise it has to wait for all the bindings to happen, then that HTML will occur. But with Angular Universal, you can design your static pages and that will be loaded first. After that, binding will occur. Okay. How do we create generic functions in service? Let's say for all the API call, let's say when we talk about API calls, we just have four, like get, post, put, delete. These are the four normal operations we perform. So rather than creating all the API call in all the services, we can have a common service. So generic is the type what we provide. So we don't have to bind to the particular interface of the class. So it will be generic. So the syntax you can see public, this is just the method name. Instead of your class or the interface name, you can provide T here. So that makes it generic. And while returning data also in observable, you can make it the T. Okay, then this is the normal way. So here also you can pass it on the T. So this is the generic function. Someone will ask you like how we can create a common functions for all the API calls. So this is the way how we do it. Okay, one more intro question is about package.json. Like we have two sections, dependencies and dev dependencies. Let me show you this. Oh, so you can see dependencies is there and dev dependencies are there. So in dependencies, these are the packages which we need when we deploy the application on the environment and the locally also. All these packages are necessary when we work locally also and when we deploy this application on the server also. Okay, but dev dependencies are the packages which we need only locally. Okay, these packages are not needed when we deploy the application on the server. Okay, so this is the another difference someone will ask, like dev dependencies and the dependencies. So you should know it. Next question, tree shaking. Tree shaking is again a question which will come with the Angular IV. So that is the render we have. So tree shaking process is basically to reduce the download size of the application over the network. Tree shaking, what it does, it will remove the unused modules from the final bundle of our Angular application. Okay, so that is the way, or define the way, like what tree checking is. It will just remove the unused modules or unused code from the final bundle of our Angular application. Next question, what are the router events? So as we know, like there are number of events we have, like navigation start, route config load start, then activation start, resolve end, activation end, on scroll, navigation cancel, navigation end, child activation end. So these are the number of router events you have. Some practical uses are there, but just to name some few, so you can keep all this in mind. Next question, view child. So this is the last question. Again, it is, you might already know. So view child is like if you need to create the instance of any component or any HTML in the .ts. So in JavaScript, how we used to access any DOM element, same thing. Let's say if you want to add any style or any pick up any HTML or append any HTML, all these things we used to do in JavaScript using accessing that DOM element. So same thing we can do by using view child. So as you can see, we have a paragraph with hash property title. So now in .ts we can create a view child, and this title property, whatever the hash property we provide here, we have to provide it in view child, and then in element title. So we can get this dot element title dot native element style dot color dot red. This is the same code what we used to do with JavaScript. With inner HTML also you can do. Okay, this is the one way accessing normal HTML element in the .ts. Another way is we can access same way component also. So as you can see, we have created the view child and we have passed our actual component class name. Okay, in user com and the data type, like same component. So then with this dot user com, I can access all the variables and the function I have in that user component. So these are the all let's say important advanced level interview questions what we have in Angular. It almost cover everything what we have, like from Angular element, dynamic components, everything what we have. Okay, So that's it with this video. Again, in the next interview, we will cover some of the medium interviews questions which are left. Till then, thank you, and please do like and subscribe.